Hello class. In this video, I'm gonna cover the basic concepts of an array and how you use it and what applications that needs an array. So let's go ahead and look at the slides. Basically, in this video, I'm just going over the slides, and in some other video, I will go over the coding examples. So let's go ahead and look at the slides. So let's say you want to store one score for one student. It's easy, right? You just declare a score, an integer score like this, and you use one variable. That's all you need, right? However, let's say I have 40 students in this class, and I want to store the score of 40 students. It's not practical to declare 40 variables like this, right? Because I want to store 40 score of 40 student, I need 40 variables. I may need to declare score 1, score 2, score 3, and so on. And I need 40 of them. That is not practical because it's hard to keep track of 40 variables. So how do we avoid this problem of declaring 40 variables? We can use something called an array. And what it means is you use one variable, but you can store multiple values of the same type. So basically, that's what array is all about. So let's take a look at the next slide, which I will, in this setup slides, I'm going to cover the array, how to store multiple values with the same data type, and also point out some common errors like invalid subscript or invalid index and memory overlays, or what happens if you access outside of your array. And we also go over array decoration, initialization, manipulation, comparison, and also how you pass an array as a function argument. So let's go ahead and take a look at the basic syntax, how you declare an array. It's very simple. Basically, you declare a data type, the type of the data that you will store in this array, and followed by array name, and then the left bracket, followed by the array size, how many elements you want to allocate for your array. And then the right square bracket, and then semicolon just terminate the statement. So what this statement does is it tells the compiler to reserve the appropriate amount of memory based on your data type that is big enough to store the number of elements of this array size. For example, if I want to store five of the test score, and the data type is integer, I just do this. I say the data type is int, the variable name is scores, and the size of the array is 5. So basically, I'm telling the compiler to reserve appropriate memory that is big enough for me to store 5 integer score. And you access each individual element by using something we call subscript or index. So the first score, you access the first score by using index 0. So let's say this is my array score. The variable name or the array name is score. I access the first element of this score array by using subscript 0 or index 0. And the second element is subscript 1 or index 1. The third element is subscript 2 or index 2. And the last element is 4. So I have an array of 5 elements, but the last um, index of the last element that I can access is 4, not 5, because the index start from 0. I will not be able to access if I specify index 5 or subscript 5, that is beyond my array. And basically, that is a problem. I cannot do that. So let's take a look at how you access individual array elements. I can assign a value to an array element similar to the way I assign it to an integer variable, right? So this is my first element at my array. And if this is just a one single variable integer, you just use a variable name and then you use equal sign and then you specify the value. However, this is not a single variable, this is an element in the array, so I have to specify the index or the subscript. So the first element in my array is index 0, and then I assign score 79. And I can also print or output the content of my elements of my array using the index. So this cout will print the content of the first element of my array. It does not print the entire array. It only print or output only one element. Also, you can do the same for cin. You can read the input into a single element of the array. In this case, that score index 1. That's the second element of the array. So if we go back here, this is score index 0, this is score index 1. And you can also do arithmetic or use this array index, array element in any expression. So I say score index 4 is the sum of score index 0 and score index 1. That is perfectly legal. You can assign and you can also access the array elements using the index. However, this is not legal. You cannot say, I want to output the entire array by doing cout. That doesn't work. This is considered an error because you cannot do cout or print the entire array in one statement. The only array you can do that is an array of character, which we will talk about at the end of this slide. So if you want to print the entire array, what do? Well, you have to use a for loop and you access individual elements one at a time. And the array index can be either a constant, like number 3 right here, or it can be a variable like this. So my variable I is assigned a value of 5. So when I say score index 5 or score index I, it means I access the this is the 6th element of the array, which is the problem with our array. Remember, our score array is declared as score index 5. So this is the problem. If I try to access the index that is beyond my score, this may produce what we call runtime error, which means that it may print the contents of some random memory location, and you may not see the score that you're looking for. So this is considered an index out of bound error. That means you access an array element that is beyond your array bound. And the way that you can look at individual element or assign the value to individual element is using a for loop. This is very common. In this example, I declare array size as a constant 5. So I hope you still remember what you learned in chapter 1 or 2, where you learned about a const keyword. So what it means is after you assign a value, this const stands for constant. And what it means is once you assign a value to a constant, you will not be able to change it. If you change it, that is considered an error. The compiler will generate some compiling error if you try to change it. So the array size is an integer data type, int, and we assign the value of 5 to it. That means during your program, you should not change it to anything else. It's a constant. And by the conventions, a constant variable is all uppercase. So you need to use all uppercase for constant variable, and you can separate the different words of the variable by using underscore. So that is a C++ convention. And then we declare an array of numbers, and we say array size. So array size is basically 5. And then we can, sorry, the slide jumped somewhere. Okay, so what we want to do in this loop is we initialize, or we assign the entire array or each element of the array with the number 99. And with the array, usually your loop conditions is less than your array size. Why do we want to do that? You see that this count is a loop control variable, right? This is a for loop. You initialize your loop control variable to 0, and each iteration to the loop, you increment it by 1. The condition to continue this loop is count must be less than array size, which is must then be less than 5. So count will take the value from 0 to 4. So that's 5 times, right? You start with 0 and you start counting increment count by 1 every time to the loop. So we start with 0 and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 5 elements of the array that we assign the value of 99. Moving on to the next slide. Sometimes we want to declare an array and also initialize the values at the same time. So let's look at this example. We declare a constant integer 5, and we are not using it here. We're using it in the next declaration. But on this statement, we say just integer score. That's how you declare an array, right? And then left and right bracket, that's how you declare an array, but you don't specify the size. So how does the compiler know the size? This is something called implied size. What it means is the compiler will say, you're not telling me the size, so I'm gonna figure out the maximum size of your array is the number of elements in this list. And the syntax is the equal sign, and then the left curly brace, and then your list of values. So this is an integer value, integer score. So we assign the list of integer to this array, and then the right curly brace, close the list, and then terminate the statement by semicolon. So the compiler said, you're not telling me the size, but I'm going to give you the maximum size based on this list, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5. And the next statement say we declare an array of size 5, but we initialize it to nothing, right? It looks like we're not assigning or initializing the array with any value. We don't specify any value in this curly braces. However, what it means is you initialize all elements of the score array to 0 when we do this. When you don't specify the value, the compiler say, okay, I know what you mean. You want to initialize all the array elements to the value of 0. That's when you don't specify the value. And one thing what you want to pay attention to is the list of value you assign. This is the order in which they appear in the list. So your array index 0 is 29. Index 1 is 82. Index 2 is 91, and so on. So this is the value you assign, and then the index go along with it. So the first value corresponds to index 0. And sometimes you can also initialize the value that is less than your size, but it cannot be more than your size. So in this case, size is 5, and then we initialize this array with 3 values, which is okay. You cannot initialize this array with 6 values. That will go beyond your array, and that is called array index our bound problem, right? The next slide also show an example where we declare an array of string. So the array can be of any type. We just saw an array of integer. We can do the same with the data type string. We already learned string in some earlier units, right? So we say we're going to declare an array of string that is big enough to contain 7 elements, which is size 7. And we initialize day of the weeks to this array. So either we say we have an array of 7, or we don't have to specify any size, and we specify the list. Automatically, the compiler will give you the size. The compiler will say, I'm going to count the value in here. So this is an array of string. So each element of the array is enclosed in double quote, and you separate each element with the comma. So this is one element, this is second element, this is third, and so on. So that's how the compiler figure it out. So basically, when we initialize the array with the list, the compiler allocate a block of memories or an array of that number of elements, and then it take that value and it store into that array. We call it implicit array sizing. That means you don't specify the size explicitly, but it is implicit. And the plus and minus sign, I want a plus and minus increment and decrement operator. It depends on where you put it. It makes a difference in the array. So let's say you say score index I plus plus. What this plus plus means is you are adding 1 or increment the score element at index I by 1 more. You add 1 to the score index I. However, let's say you make a mistake. Instead of putting the right bracket right after the letter I, somehow you forgot, and then you put the right bracket after the plus plus, it has completely, it is different. What this means is you increment the value of I, but you are not changing the element or the score that is stored at index I. So the position of the right bracket make a difference in this case. And the same apply to minus minus operator. So I just want to point it out. Can you copy one array to another by one assignment statement like this? With primitive data type like integer, double, you can make an assignment statement by just copy one value of one variable to the other variable by doing this, right? With array, won't work. You cannot do this. If you want to copy the contents of the entire array, you have to use a for loop. For example, this for loop, we go, assuming we declare variable I is an integer, we start with index 0, And the loop condition is I less than array size. And every time you go to the loop, you increment I by 1. And then we say we copy the value of score index I into the new score index I. So if you need to copy the entire array, you need to use a loop. You cannot use an assignment statement. That will not work. They see out entire array. The only data type that see out will work for the array is the char. So what is this declaration? What does it say? Do you remember that char or character is a primitive data type that is used to store one letter, right? Just one letter, not multiple letter. Multiple letter is a string. So char is one character, one letter. And you can also use char array inside of the string and you initialize it like this. So in this example, I declare a char array name and I don't specify the size, but I initialize this char name by a string. So this is a string, right? So basically you are initializing name with Alexa. However, with one more hidden features or you need to know is when you assign a string to a char array, the compiler reserve one more byte that is longer than this length. So how many characters are there in this name, Alexa? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So the length of Alexa is 5. However, the char array is really 6. The size of char array is really 6 because the compiler say, I need one more character to store something called end of character array. And that character has a value of 0. So that's why when you do this, when you declare a char array and you assign a string to it, please remember that your size is 1 bigger than the string length. So you will see more of the string manipulation or the char array manipulation in the futures in some other video. And this cout statement, I say it only works with char array. You cannot output or you cannot print the entire array with one cout statement. Only array of char will work. You cannot do this with any other type array. You know, like the score array we had before, it won't work. How do you pass arrays to functions? So let's say I have a function named print score. This function will print the array score and it also takes the array size. So in the function, this is how you make the function call. But the function prototype should look like this. The function prototype said, I have a function print score. I am taking an array of int and also I am taking another parameter int. Or in the function's header, you say, I'm taking an array of score and also an integer that tell me the size of the function. So when you make the function call, you give it the array names, you also give it the array size. So we're gonna look at how you make a function call and pass array to the functions in some other slide. So this is the end of the array, basic decorations and initialization and so on. We will look at some coding example, how to use array in some other video. Thanks for watching.